Whether that was the case over here is not really relevant, but the fact was that the first minyan lay in Parsha Zohar, and went home. Omad haminyan hasheni lispala leveis kriyas Parsha Zohar motzu b'sefer Torah toz gomer. The second minyan, laning out of the same sefer Torah that the first minyan laned out of, found a toz gomer in the Sefer Torah. V'hitziu Sefer Torah acher likris bay. So as the halacha demands, they took out a second Sefer Torah to read Parsha Zohar. Now he refers to the mistake over here, a toz gomer, which means we're dealing about a type of mistake in the Sefer Torah that could not have just happened. Meaning this mistake was there from the beginning of the beginning of the rite of the Sefer Torah. There was a letter missing, there was an extra letter, whatever it is. It was a letter that was written incorrectly. But be that as it may, this is a puzzle of Sefer Torah. The first minyan read out of a puzzle of Sefer Torah. The question is, Nimsa karu b'Sefer Torah psula. Im chayv al b'nei minyan hasheni litroyach la'idiyah livnei minyan harishon. Sefer Torah psula karu k'dei she'ikru pam shniya b'Sefer Torah acher kosher. The question is, do the people of the second minyan have to make it their business to try to find and go around to every person that davened at the first minyan and let them know that their Sefer Torah that they read out of was puzzle, and as a result of that, they themselves have to now go back and hear Kriyas Parsha Zohar? That's the shaila that the B'tzeil HaChochma declares. With regular, the question is you have to start from the beginning of the parsha. I'm not sure. I think that in Hilchos Sefer Torah, by regular Kriyas Sefer Torah, I think you do not have to do that. But by Parsha Zohar, I think you do. This was in the I don't know if it's in Parsha Zohar, but it was in the column in which Parsha Zohar was read. That was the shaila. Hashem Yazreini Ad Kan Teichen HaShaila. So that's the shaila Rabbi say. So the people of the second minyan have to go around and try to notify everybody in the first minyan. Now this could be a big tircha. I don't know how many people down in the first minyan, but the people in the second minyan are going to spend their Shabbos morning knocking on doors and finding out who was in the first minyan. Well, of course, that's what we're going to talk about, yeah. Can't tell tomorrow. Tomorrow's Sunday. What? Don't wait Monday. Well, that's what we'll see. So, what's Kriyas HaTorah? Well, you usually use a separate Sefer Torah for Kriyas Parsha Zohar. That's normally how it works, unless you only have a shul that has one Sefer Torah, but the derech is you take out two Sefer Torah. That's the shaila at hand. So, in order to understand this shaila, Rabbi, to paskin this shaila, we have to analyze what exactly is the mitzvah of Kriyas Parsha Zohar. Is it a deraisa? Is it a drabanan? Must you read out of a Sefer Torah? Must we read out of a Sefer Torah that is kosher? And after we answer all of these shailas, then we can go back and try to determine in paskin the shaila at hand. So as to the etzem shaila of whether Parsha Zohar must be read out of indeed a Sefer Torah, this is in fact a machlekes hapaiskim. The Sefer HaEshkol from the Frierdiker Paiskim writes, Korah ha-Megillah al peh lo yotza. The halacha Rabbi say is if you read Megillas Esther, not Parsha Zohar, you read Megillas Esther bal peh lo yotza. How do we know that Megillas Esther must be read out of a bona fide sefer, out of a Megillah? Zokte Eshkol, Asya Zechira, Ksiv Hacha, Hayomim Hoila, Niskar, Venasi, Viksiv Hasam, Ksiv Sais, Dikaran Basefer, Mala Halan Basefer, Avtan Basefer. Says the Eshkol, that the fact that it says Hayomim Hoila Niskarim in the Megillah So it's Gzeira Shava Zechira Zechira. Where's the other Zechira? Because it says by Parsha Zochar, Kshav Zay Zikaron B'Sefer V'Zimbos Ne Yeshua Zikaron B'Sefer. So you see that the word Zikaron is linked to Sefer, just like Kriyas Parsha Zochar must be out of a Sefer, Hu Adin Megillah must be out of a Sefer, and therefore Karal Pelo Yotzer. Zokta Eshko V'Lekol Amemer D'Hai Zechira Yina Ba'almo, and don't think that the word Zechira really means to remember. The Zechiris Amalek Nami Sefer Boy. Says the Eshkol, you see from here that Kriyas Parsha Zochar must be out of a Sefer. The Ihai Loi Boy Mikra Megillah Nami Loi Boy Sefer Da'asi Zechiris Zechir Miskiris Amalek. So the Eshkol is unequivocal and clear that Parsha Zochar must be read out of something that has the din of Sefer, has to have, which and the qualifications of Sefer are that it has to be written Lishma, it has to be written on a cloth, it has to be written B'dyai. In other words, the Sefer Torah. Azay Zoch the Eshkol, Bar Milole. That is issue number one. Issue number two, Rabbi Isai, is must Parsha Zochar be read in a Sefer where there is a minyan present? Meaning, let's say if for whatever reason it is, you miss davening on Parsha Zochar. It's not the week to miss not davening, but you miss davening. So you come to shul, everybody's home, you go into the Yoren Kodesh, you want to be Eitzi Parsha Zochar, you take out a Sefer Torah, you read, can you be Eitzi Parsha Zochar? I'll read out of a Sefer, because the Eshkol says you need Sefer. But do you need a minyan as well? What's that? Well, we'll get to the women. Hold on, we'll get to the women. So Rabbi say there is a very famous Rosh in the 7th parak of Masechta Brachos, famous Gemara. The Gemara in Brachos Mem Zayin Amud Beis says, Rabbi Eliezer Shicher Avdai, that there was 9 people in shul, they needed a minyan. Rabbi Eliezer had an Eved Knaini. Eved Knaini before his emancipation doesn't have a din of a full-fledged Yid. But once you want to emancipate and you're Meshacher and Eved, he becomes a Jew. So here you have 9 people and 1 Eved Knaini. So Rabbi Eliezer was Meshacher as Eved, lo and behold, now he's Jewish. We have a minyan. So the Gemara Brachos asks a kasha, V'heicha Avid Hachi. How could Rabbi Eliezer be Meshacher Avdai? We know the halacha is HaMeshacher Avdai is over Basei Shenemar Lo'ilo Behem Tavaidu. The halacha is, Rabbi say, that you're not allowed to be Meshacher your Eved, because the pasuk says Lo'ilo Behem Tavaidu. They should be our slaves forever. So the Gemara asks, how could he do it? How could he do it? So the Gemara says, the Gemara's maskana is, it's a mitzvah derabim. Einachinami, under normal circumstances, you're not supposed to be Meshacher your Eved, but mitzvah derabim, in order to go ahead and to make a minyan, so the mitzvah of having a minyan is daicha and pushes aside the yisur of lo'ilam em tavaidu. Says the Rosh, in the Masechta Brachos, you see from this Gemara Yissocher, that a mitzvahs asei derabim midirabonon can push an isser asei deraisa, because davening with a minyan, says the Rosh, is only a mitzvah midirabonon, but since it's a mitzvah derabim, it's a public mitzvah, it's doiche the private leis asei of oilam em tavaydu. Says the Rosh v'zel l'shoinai. Doi mistaverli lilmoi demairi basara deraisa kigan likris parsha zochar shehu me'atayra. Says the Rosh, what's my raya that a mitzvah derabonon can be deicha and essay deraisa? Maybe it's speaking about kriyas parsha zochar. which means this was a Kriyas HaTorah min HaTorah. Kriyas Parshas Yissocher, which the Rosh says before-ish, Daraisa Kigan Likris of Parshas Yissocher Shumei HaTorah. So why? What's my raya? Maybe this was Punkt. It was Parshas Yissocher. There was only 9 people in shul. He was Meshacher Eva. Zok the Rosh loy mistaver. It's not logical to say that the particular case happened on Shabbos Parshas Yissocher. But what do we see from the Rosh? We see from the Rosh clearly that Kriyas Parshas Yissocher is a mitzvah min HaTorah, and it's a mitzvah to read it min HaTorah b'tzibur. That is the only Kriyas HaTorah that is deraisa. Kriyas Parshas Yissocher b'tzibur is deraisa. So we have from this Rosh, that plus the Eshkol, which we already mentioned, the Kriyas Parshas Yissocher must be from a Sefer Torah, and it must be in fact mi'asara. And based on this, Rabbi say, the Trumas Hadeshen, famous Trumas Hadeshen, in Siman Kufches, Paskins La'alacha, that people, in ancient times, there are people that lived, that were Shemei Torah mitzvahs, obviously, but there are people that lived in the hinterlands. And they didn't have a minyan. You lived in Fargo, North Dakota. There's no minyan. Now, nobody today in Fargo, North Dakota, from what I suspect, I don't think that they're makbid on Kriyas Parshas Yissocher. But in Amal Kiyarin, even in America, there were these little steplach that they had. But in Talmudic times or earlier times, medieval times, certainly. So you don't have a minyan in your shtad. What should you do? Paskins the Trumas Hadeshen LaHalacha, that the people that are living out there in the Hicks, and that they don't have a minyan, must come to shul on Shabbos Parshas Yissocher to hear Kriyas HaTorah min HaTorah. And that's preferable than to come to shul on Purim to hear the Megillah. Because the Megillah you can learn privately. Because Mikra Megillah should l'chachila be basara, but if you don't have a minyan, you can take on a Megillah, you can learn it by yourself. So Sokta Tumas Hadeshen, based on this Rosh that you see, Kriyas Parshas Yissocher min HaTorah is deraisa, the Bnei HaKfarim have to come to shul to hear Kriyas Parshas Yissocher. So that Rabbi say, on one hand is the Eshkoil and the Rosh are of the opinion that Parshas Yissocher must be laid from the Sefer Torah and must be laid in the minyan. On the other side of the equation, Rabbi say, there is the Ramban al HaTorah. The sheet of the Ramban al HaTorah is that you are Yetze Kriyas Parshas Yissocher with merely saying over what Amalek did to us and telling it over to your children. Bis the Yetze Kriyas Parshas Yissocher min HaTorah. That's what the mitzvah is. Zocher is Asher Oscha Amalek. Take out a chumash, read the parsha and the parshas Kiseitze, tell it over to your children. V'zehu bis the Yetze. Zok the Ramban, it's a Ramban in Parshas Kiseitze. Zok the Ramban, Shahaschira Hishle, Nishkach Mashos Solonu Amalek, Ad Shenimcha Shemay Mitachas HaShemayim. We should remember what Amalek did to us. We should never forget. V'nisaper zeh l'banenu l'darsenu l'aymer lehem kach osa lanu harosha u'lekach nitztavinu limcheis HaShemayim. If at the Shabbos table you tell over your children that what Amalek did to us, you're Yaitz, according to the Ramban, the mitzvahs of Zechiras Ma'is Amalek. That's it. Just like, for instance, if you look at the Siddur, I don't know if you say it, but there's a Sheish Zechiras. 6 things you're supposed to remember every day. They don't need to say for Zoches Asher Ksafta Bamidbar. Zoches Asher As Hashem LaMiriam. Do you ever read that out of Sefer Torah? There it says, you have to remember that. This is Maimer Asinai, Maisa Miriam, Heksafta Bamidbar, then Maisa Egel, Amalek. Fine, one of the Sheish Zechiras, that's all it is. So according to the Ramban, the people in the first minyan who read Parshas Yissocher out of the Sefer Torah Psula, they're certainly Yetze. They talked about Amalek, they remembered Amalek, they said the words Amalek, it wasn't a Sefer Torah, who cares? You don't even need a Sefer Torah.
One person might see another.
According to the Ramban, can one person might see another? Well, as soon as he doesn't have to be might see him, he hears it. If I hear you talking about Amalek, I think about Amalek. So maybe I have to say it, but that's all I have to do. And that Rabbi Sai is the Shita of the Sefer Ginas Vrodim. Very famous Sefer. I mean, not so famous, but it's a very choshev Sefer. The Reshivas Zatzal always used to quote the Ginas Vrodim. And he says that Margola Bepumayu de Rabbanan the Kriyas Dalit Parashis Hey Min HaTeira. The Welt says that the Dalit Parashis are Min HaTeira. Says the Ginas Vrodim Va'onoichi lo yadaiti heichan ha-mitzvah hazu ksuva b'Teira. No such thing. L'chei nira de korle mi HaTeira v'hei mi Rabbanan. Well, he says that the Margala Bapume, that people say the 4 parshas are Min HaTeira. At best, there are only 2 Min HaTeira, and even that's doubtful. The bottom line is we'll soon see there's only one that's Min HaTeira.
So even the Ramban would say that you have to say this on Shabbos Parshas Zohar.
We'll get to why we say it in Shabbos Parshas Zohar, but no, you would not have to say it in Shabbos Parshas Zohar. That's the Minchas Chinuch Shita as well. So, the Minchas Chinuch writes in Mitzvah Tofreish Gimel, as soon as he Tofreish Gimel is the last mitzvah in the Torah, Tofreish Gimel. V'ze'avad I borer da ha-mitzvah b'yochid gam kein mekayim rak parsa zocher ba'asar v'sefer Torah midrabanan al me'atera daisha yizker b'peh. Reading it out of Sefer Torah, reading it in a minyan, that's the Rabbanan. But as long as I say the word Zocher is Asher Osachal Amalek, says the Minchas Chinuch Yetzi Min HaTeira. So Rabbi say this is what we have, a bona fide machlekes mikotze lakotze, machlekes harishenim, machlekes hapeiskim. What exactly is the mitzvah of Parsha Zocher? The Eshkol and the Trumas Hadesh and the Rosh are of the opinion that Parsha Zocher must be read from the Sefer Torah in a minyan. On the other hand, the Ramban and the Kinas Vrodim and the Minchas Chinuch and other places say, no, that's a D'Rabbanan. And it's a D'Rabbanan to read it before Purim, but that's all, it's not a D'Rabbanan. So how do we hold the halacha? Zokter Shulchan Aruch Simen Tov Reish Pei Hey Siv Zayin Yesh Oimrim She Parshas Zochar U Parshas Parah Duma Chayovin Lekrosam Midaraisa. Now, right away the Mishnah Berurah points out and says that Parshas Parah is a deraisa is very, very doubtful. And Bismanenu that there is no, we're all Tomei and there is no Korban Pesach. So, what's that? Today there's no Korban Pesach, so Parshas Parah Duma is not deraisa. But Parshas Zochar is deraisa. Chayovin likosim in Atayra lefichach b'nei hayishuvim shein lahem minyan tzrichen lovei lemokim sheish minyan b'shabbos halolu k'dei lishmoya parshas elu shehei midoraisa. So the Shulchan Aruch paskins like the Rosh, the Trumas Hadesh, who paskins like the Rosh. That's a mitzvah asay midoraisa to come to shul on the Shabbos before Purim and to hear Parshas Zochar from the Sefer Torah in a minyan. Azay sagt der Shulchan Aruch. Sagt der Mishnah Berurah, the Chsiv Zocher says, "Shal Gamrina be Gemart I Zocher Hainu Bamir Mitech HaSefer." The Mishnah Berurah alludes to this eshkol. V'leidai b'mashiyik v'zebaliba. It's not sufficient merely to think about it. V'alkein sarach hakari lechavin lahaitzi kol hashemin v'gamashmei shemin tzrichen lechavin lotzeis. And that is why you have to give a klap. Everybody should have in mind to be to the mitzvah say deraisa of Kriyas Parsha Zochar. The Balkari has to have kavanah to be meitzi them, and the people who are listening have to have kavanah to be yetzi. Azay zok the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so we've established that. Has to be Mintech HaSefer, has to be B'minyan, and it's a deraisa. That's the way we pass it. Now, the Shaila Rabbi is, the definition of a Sefer Torah, must it be a kosher Sefer Torah? Which means our case over here, that the first minion laid out of a Sefer Torah that happened to be puzzle. Does a Sefer Torah puzzle do not have halach of a Sefer? So the Pri Megadim in Simin Kuf Mem Gimel says Mefurish that a Sefer Torah Psula does not have halach of a Sefer. Azay zok the Pri Megadim. Kvar kasavnu amira b'parshas Paro Yissocher toes v'karu miktzis haparsha diyesh leisi Sefer Torah kshev v'likris mireish u'v'lei bracha deina ma'keves. The definition of a Sefer has to be a kosher Sefer. And that Rabbi says the Shita of Rabbi Kiveger as well. And I'd like to share with you this Rabbi Kiveger. This is a beautiful Rabbi Kiveger. Where does Rabbi Kiveger say that if you have a Sefer Torah apostle, you can't be Yetze Parsha Zohar? So listen to Rabbi Kiveger. So Rabbi Kiveger in Madura Kama Siman Samachtes, Maisa Shahaya. Al das ha-sefer shenisgala shezesh nasayim yomim mochat tefillin shoyamunach b'seich habatim chateches klaf b'loi parsius. You have a sefer who's selling tefillin, and they open up the tefillin, and there's nothing in the tefillin. They're blank pieces of parchment. Why was he doing it? Unfortunately, he's a fraud. Unfortunately, this was not the first case, the first time it happened, it's not the last time it will happen. So what? Okay, fine. Ice Sefer. Fine. Fired him. However, the problem is, Kosav Bei Sifri HaTeiros. But from the time that they discovered this, in the meantime, he had written 2 Sifrei Torah. Rabbi say, what do you hold as the status of those Sifrei Torah that this fraudulent Sefer wrote?
He's only a moral tefillin.
He's only a moral tefillin. That's a new one. I have not heard. That's a new. They need the money. So fine, go for the gold. Go. The Sefer Torah is $50,000.
When he was cautious, he wrote to the film.
Ben Tayim, Uvigamish Ben Tayim. In between the time he sold the tefillin, he wrote 2 Sifrei Torah.
Well, how do we know?
He didn't write the
Sifrei
Torah is not kosher.
What?
He wrote the Sifrei Torah.
Because the person's a fraud. Maybe he wrote the Sefer Torah in the bathroom.
Until you proved Apostle A that you're still a
How do we know?
You don't have to make some as a rush. I opened up the tefillin. There's no parsha there. He didn't do anything. I thought they didn't mess him out to Russia.
He didn't say he did.
The guy's a muhsik fraud. Period. So what's the deal with the Sefer Torah? What? Sefer Torah does not do Lishma? Of course it does. Of course. Every time you write a nice Hershey, you want a Sefer Torah. You have to write L'Shem Kedusha Sefer Torah. Avada. It has to be Mu'ubad Lishma. It has to be written Lishma. So, here you are, Kiveger, you have this Shaila. What's going to be with the Sefer Torah? So Kiveger has a whole long tshuva to be machshir the Sefer Torah. But in one section, Oyeshli Snif Gadol, I have a big lumdus to say that in certain circumstances we could use the Sefer Torah. You know what those circumstances are? Im ha-sefer kosav sefer Torah elu la'anshei ha'ir shesheichen b'seicham. If he wrote the Sifrei Torah for the shul that he himself davens in. Why? L'mayde kaimel an dem in a choshed lechol dvar masurim al a choshed l'mochar misarach etzle v'oichel imay. Because the halacha Rabbi is, let's say you find a guy who sells treifet chickens. just making up this case. Right? He sells treifet chickens. Can you eat in this guy's house? Is the halacha Rabbi say you can eat in the guy's house? You know why? Baler's a from a yid. I sell treifet chickens. Gotta make a business. Geschäft is geschäft. Business is business. So the halacha Rabbi say is he's chashud lamachram, but is misarach etzloi, which means I wouldn't eat nevela. I would sell nevela, but I wouldn't eat nevela. What do you think I am? A shegetz? So the halacha is l'mayda kaimalon. If we know that the guy is an erlich, a person with his own personal kashrus, you can eat in his house. Shachar beautiful lumd is this sefer wrote the sefer Torah for the shul. He davens in the shul. He gets an aliyah. He's going to make a birchas ha-Torah on the sefer Torah that he knows that it's possible. Brochel v'atola. Zokr kiveger. Noch besser. In ke yesh lemer as ha-sefer Torah sheshayach lekri l'chol b'nei ha'ir gam hu michlolam v'kama pomi yichru l'aleis l'sefer Torah zu v'yivorach aleha V'chein lotzes yedei kriyas b'sefer Torah midei shavim shavate v'chein parshat Yissocher deraisa. The guy comes to shul on parshat Yissocher. He's an erlich yid. He wants to be Yitzei kriyas parshat Yissocher. I'm going to write a apostle sefer Torah. I will never be Yitzei Yissocher in my life. I won't do that. Zokr kiveger. Therefore, we can assume that the Sefer Torah that we know that he's going to be Yitzei with is Avada Kosher. Because he's not going to make brachas l'vatala on a pasuk Sefer Torah, and he's going to use this Sefer Torah to be Yitzei's own kriyas parshat Yissocher, which if it's a pasuk Sefer Torah is nicht Yitzei. Zetman dach Rabbi Kiv Zetman for this Rabbi Kiveger like the Pri Megadim, that if you have a apostle sefer Torah, you're not Yitzei kriyas parshat Yissocher, because you need sefer. The definition, according to Rabbi Kiveger and according to Pri Megadim, is sefer is a sefer kosher. Mamela Rabbi Sai, back to our case with the minyan rishon, laying out of a sefer Torah that was possible, according to Rabbi Kiveger and the Pri Megadim. They weren't Yitzei. You have to go around and tell them. But nothing is ever so simple. The Shalom Meshiv and the Maram Shik both say that a Sefer Torah that's possible is still kosher for Parshat Yissocher. Listen to the Shalom Meshiv. The Lekriyas Parshat Yissocher ain't safe, ain't sarach Sefer Torah rak shlo yikra al peh. Ubavare the kosher gam benichta bipsul di mikom makom al peh loy mikri. You can't read it bal peh. It's not bal peh. It's out of a sefer. It's a personal sefer. It's not on it. Who cares? Azez of the Shalom Meshiv. It could be. You could even read it from a chumash according to this. I don't know. So Rabbi say, now that you're educated, and now that you know the sugya, and you know the Ramban, and you know the Rosh, and you know the Pri Megadim, and you know Reb Kiveger, and you know the Maram Shik, and you know the Shalom Meshiv, Paskin the Shaila. Do you have to go around and tell everybody in the first minyan that they laid out of a Sefer Torah? Apostle. What? What's that? Tell them to come back by Kiseitse. And what if it's an Ibrior? And Purim is 13 months away from Parshas Kiseitse, and Chazal say that you have to. If it's an Ibrior, it is. Well, so it depends. If they missed Purim, they missed Parsach the last time, yeah. Sveik. Zot Herschel has Sveik heißt es. Sofek heißt es, do you need Sefer Torah at all? Sofek, what do you need the Sefer Torah if it's possible, if it's right, Sveik. Zoch de Tshuvas B'tzel HaChochma Seda Poshet Eitze. You don't have to spend your Shabbos afternoon going from door to door. But what do? Text them, right. You send out an email to everybody in the first minyan after Shabbos and tell them, make it your business to come Purim morning to shul and have kavanah to be Yetzei Kriyas Parsha Zohar with the parsha that we read on Purim morning, Vayovay Amalek, which the Mogan Avram says you can be Yetzei Kriyas Parsha Zohar with the Kriyas Hatera of Vayovay Amalek. Even though Rabbi Sai, the Mishnah Berurah argues with that Mogan Avraham, and then Mishnah Berurah says you cannot be Yetzei with Vayavay Amalek, because the Mishnah Berurah writes and he says because you need Zechira Sheyesh by Mechia, because the mitzvah is Timcha Zecher Amalek, and the Kriya of Parshas Vayishla Abishalach of Vayavay Amalek does not have Mechia in there. Says the Mishnah Berurah, I argue with the Mogan Avram, and you cannot be Yetzei. Aber Rabbi Sai, in this predicament where you can make a case that they don't have to think anything at all, so kedai who the Mogan Avraham that they could be semech on the Mogan Avram to be Yetzei Purim morning. Except they have to know to be Yetzei, and they have to know to be mechavan to be Yetzei, and they have to know to. The Balkari has to know to be mighty them. So that's what you send out. That's what you put in the shul bulletin. You put it up on the shul door. That everybody has to know that the Sefer Torah is possible and it has to kavanah in Parshas Vayovay Amalek.
Could you actually read Parshas Zohar Purim morning?
Could you read Purim more Parshas Zohar? You mean?
Yeah, the one we read children.
Yeah, L'char you could. Now, even though you are missing out on that the Rabbanan said that you should read Parsha Zohar on the Shabbos before Purim, L'hakti Mechias Amalek L'mikra Megillah, but that again, that's a Rabbanan at best.
Aren't the psulas in the Megillah that are kosher? You can still read.
I mean, Lamais, it's kosher. Well, yeah, but the way we pass into our Megillahs are kosher. Now, just want to point out one last thing, which is really a bit off subject. But, as I mentioned, Rabbi Say, there are paiskim that say that women are chayiv in Parsha Zohar, and therefore that's why women make a point of coming to shul. As I mentioned, that's why many families, they go to 2 minyanim, early minyan, late minyan. I've always held, and I asked even a paisik whether he thought my cheshbon is right, that women can be Yetzei certainly with the Kriyas HaTorah that they hear Purim morning in the shul. In spite of the fact that the Mishnah Berurah says you can't be Yetzei. But Lanias Daiti, women certainly can be Yetzei with that. Why is that? Because there's a Machlekas HaRishayna whether women are chayiv in Parsha Zohar at all. Why? Because Yesh Omrim that Vibalt Zechira is totally Mechia, Zechira and Mechia are linked. You have to have a Zechira Sheyesh by Mechia, a Zechira that reminds us to be Meicha, and women are not B'nais Melchama, and therefore a woman is potter, since she has no mitzvah of Mechia Samalek, she's potter from Zechira's Mais Samalek. That's one opinion of the Rishonim. Other Rishonim disagree, and say that they're two independent mitzvahs. There's Zechira's Mais Amalek, there's Mechias Amalek, and they're not linked, and they're not totally Zebazeh. And therefore, even though a woman is potter from Mechias Amalek, but she's chayiv in Zechiras Amalek. So I say Pasha de Cheshbon. Why does the Mishnah Berurah say that Vayavai Amalek isn't sufficient? Because you don't have Mechia in there? You don't have a Zechir of Mechia? Well, if you need Zechir of Mechia, women are potter at all. Nor was hastes you tell me that the Chira and Mechia are independent. and therefore women are chayiv. Well, if it's independent, then you don't need a zechira sheyesh by mechia. So mimanav shak with kriyas parshas vayavay amalek, they could be yaitsein. So that's the way I was made when our children were smaller, and my wife couldn't come to Parshas Yissocher, whatever it was. And I hold personally, again, that the kriyas hatayra that they make after shul for women, if there's no minyan of men who haven't heard Parshas Yissocher, I don't know what that accomplishes exactly. Because you need a minyan. According to the Rosh, you need a minyan. You need a minyan of people, a minyan have to have men. You have to have men who haven't been yaitsein. So I hold it's preferable. In other words, if they can make it the shul gesund to hate, if they can have a minyan, a gesund to hate with a minyan. But if it's a stomach kriya without a minyan of muchuyavim versus coming to shul poor morning and hearing vayav vayamolek, lani astaiti, I think that's preferable. It's more halachically eisgehalten than the other way. I don't know, because I don't run the yeshiva. If you haven't figured that one out yet. Yes. What's that?
Why doesn't the cheskes kashrus of the same?
Because that's what we pointed out in the beginning. Why did the cheskes kashrus help? The answer is because this was tos mikara. This is not a nikia that could have happened, or a dibuk that could have happened. This was something that was missing in ice. Cheskes kashrus says if you don't know when it happened, you can still in chazaka. But if it's the type of mistake that's a psul gomer from the get-go, there's chazaka ain't going to help you. Well, because they missed it. What's that?
So up until that point, there was a cheskes kashrus, even though there was...
Yeah, but the cheskes kashrus can't help you once you have the evidence staring you in the face. You can assume a Sefer Torah is kosher. Has a chazaka. But once it's proven that it's possible, it's goodbye chazaka.
So in other words, nobody who had increased the Torah from that Sefer Torah...
That's correct. If it was that type of mistake, that's right.
Nobody says you have to read from the Sefer Torah. Some people say it's a Shalom Aleichem.
Well, that's because. So Alan is asking, what about Zocher Sefer Shabbos L'Kacha? Because that's what the Gemara says in Megillah. The Gemara says Zocher Yachol Bapeh. So the Gemara makes a whole drasha. You don't have that drasha by Shabbos. Well, there's Zechira, in fact, can mean Bapeh, but that's what the Gemara in Megillah proves that by Zechira's Amalek, it's not like that.
What if the mistake is found months and months after?
So I'd like to share, Rabbi said tonight, one hour on Parshas Tetzaveh, the Heintige Parsha.